extended holiday for him. So what goes with Public Works and those multiple hats? I know everyone is very familiar with the basic public works operations and maintenance, but he's the one that coordinates with our engineering group. Went through the process of securing a firm that we're now working with. Of course, the lake and the stormwater environment, big issues in Pine Lake. Green space, we're in the middle of going through developing a master plan. Just had heavy outreach to the public, an upcoming town hall meeting, facilities, all of the city's facilities, both from a maintenance standpoint, rehabilitation, and even the rental of certain facilities. But overall managing these facilities, ensure that they're soundly operational. And then just major, given some of the recent funding that the city has had in many projects, capital improvements. So going back to general government, essentially a one-person staff, Public Works, a one-management person staff, now assisted with some reorganization, the NEDA from an administrative support standpoint, and maintenance staff, a couple of people. Public safety, our illustrious police chief, police operations, law enforcement, emergency and disaster operations, code compliance. I will tell you, all of those functions don't necessarily fall to a police chief, but in Pine Lake, we're small and mighty. And the chief wears those multiple hats and wears them well and has for many, many years. The municipal court. Municipal court has gone through some transition in the state of Georgia. I will tell you that in every state that I have worked, with the exception of Georgia, the municipal court falls under the judicial branch. The fact that the municipal aspect of our court system is administered by the local government. And recently, I think through some state law changes, was kind of made independent, rightfully so, of police departments. And so in our case, we have an individual, Stephanie Capers, who is, she handles it. I don't have much experience in it. In some cases, the judge handles a lot of the administration operations. That was my experience in College Park. It's not the case here. Here it is Ms. Capers. And the multiple functions: judicial support, non-judicial operations, clerk services. So I believe that position qualifies as departmental status. And the recent appointment of Paul Salvatore, and this is on a contractual basis. And the finance functions that are listed here, I would say in the case of Pine Lake, they have been incomplete. We've done some accounting, which certainly is necessary. Budgeting from this budget document alone, I hope it tells the story that budgeting should be far more complete than it has been in the past. It's far more than numbers, from a spreadsheet. Treasury and investments. I can find little record where, despite our healthy fund balances, that we've really invested our funds other than placing them in the local checking account with very little interest to show. So we intend to turn some of that around. Debt service and enterprise resource planning, the ERP system that Mr. Salvatore inherited, that we've made actually very little utilization. A sophisticated system, but we have not taken advantage of the various modules that are available to us. So a mighty city in Pine Lake with a small and mighty staff in an overall structure of a city council that I'm going to miss, quite frankly, but I certainly look forward to the new council members who are coming in, who have since, I believe, September, October, essentially been at every meeting of the council, so they will be hitting the ground running. There are a couple of sections to get into a little bit of detail that I want to walk you through. If you would turn, and Ned, if you would move to page 16. Actually, let's start with page 15. I'm going to go through this quickly because we do have a busy agenda. This budget document for the city council, for the staff, for the public, is meant to tell a story. So I am confident that anyone who is interested will get a very good idea of what is presented here if you're willing to take some time. So I'm going to just highlight a few things. On this page, which is the last page of the table of revenue for the general fund, and I just want to go through this very last line. For 2024, and these are unaudited numbers, but they're up to date with everything except the stamp of the audit that Mr. Salvatore has put together here. So this is our best estimate of revenues that have come in, 1.372 for 2024. For 2025, the projection is 1,565,396, and then for 2026, 1,624,054. Overall, that's a 3.7% increase. Starting on page 16, I just want to highlight some of the major revenues that make up that 1,624,054 for fiscal year 2026 proposed. So on page 16, the ad valorem taxes, and ad valorem tax in Georgia refers to the property tax levied on real estate, which is the primary source of revenue for local governments. An important statement, because as we look for other sources, and while there are dozens of other sources across the country, certainly in the state of Georgia, ad valorem taxes, it's what municipalities and even counties and school boards most depend on. The current millage rate for the city of Pine Lake is 19.4 mills. That's a high millage rate for a municipality. This rate was adopted for fiscal year 2024 and maintained for the tentative 2025. The millage rate is a part of a combined property tax, which also includes levies from the DeKalb County government and the DeKalb County School District. The total combined millage rate for a property in Pine Lake for 2024 was 56.1116 mills. And that is a high millage rate. Some would say an unsustainable millage rate. And it is part of the task that is ahead that this budget only begins the discussion. Sustainability is going to be a common thread with all of the major topics this evening, including the budget, including the classification and compensation study results, and the development authority versus a downtown development authority as tools to get Pine Lake into redevelopment, to start lessening the burden that is primarily on this bedrock community of Pine Lake. There will be another topic in talking about sustainability that I think will be ripe for discussion with the new city council, and that's the issue of annexation, an issue that I know has been reviewed pretty closely by Pine Lake. But unless it is in our tool chest, our future tool chest, sustainability is going to only be more difficult. And I want to bring the council briefly up to date with some issues that are going on, led by the county in partnership with the state legislative delegation and facilitated by the DeKalb Municipal Association. So I'll come back to those comments of annexation. And certainly a couple of council members have been attending, namely Councilmember Torrent, Councilmember Goldberg, and I attended with them at the last DeKalb Municipal Association there. So there are some important issues to bring you up to date on, and I'm going to do that briefly later in this presentation. If I could refer you to page 19, the last page of the general fund revenue narratives. And all of these sources, and I'm only on the final page, but the multiple pages, I think, have self-explanatory explanations of these sources. As a city, we're entitled to them. We can certainly squeeze some of them further, but it was important to start with the education so that this council and the public has some idea of what's available to us. I want to just quickly point out fines and forfeitures in the middle of the page, and you see those various levels. But fines and forfeitures, as we talk about the municipal court system, that's basically the revenue sources that support the municipal court. Investment income, just under it, I referred to that earlier. My number was much more aggressive than 5,000, but Mr. Salvatore talked me down. But there are some things that we will need to put in place if we're going to really take advantage of investing safely in a liquid way some of our reserves. And other financing sources is what I really want to focus on. And just the short narrative on other financing sources. Pine Lake has historically utilized its general fund balance for budgetary projections. And while it has used it to balance the budget, rarely have we had to significantly use those amounts that were budgeted. So you see for estimated 2024, 66,000. The amended budget for 2025, 338,000. Those were two primary sources. The general fund balance, which I think was just under 100,000, was used. And then some revenues were identified over the course of 2025 for expenditures that had been charged, capital projects that had been charged to the general fund and that we hadn't been reimbursed for. So Mr. Salvatore, along with the auditor, are looking very closely at those numbers, and there's probably a question of how they should really be accounted for. But nonetheless, those were financing sources for 2025. A lot of that was dependent on the classification and compensation study. There was some other adjustments from 2024 to 2025 that were pretty significant, but for the most part, those funds have not been utilized once we get to the expenditure side. There's a big number, even though it's not as large as 2025, it's showing 262,054, and I think this is a number that I just didn't catch. That number should actually be 295,462. But that is the number that I have recommended for 2026 to balance the budget. And the way that I need the city council to look at that number for now is as a placeholder. That number is largely made up of implementing the classification and compensation of study. It also takes into account funding for code compliance. Those are decisions yet to be made. I didn't know what the number was going to be that was going to come back from the classification and compensation study as I was even putting together this budget. I had guesstimated a number going back for even when you implement it, moving ahead with the study. And so, because this is a one-time revenue source, we have to be careful of funding recurring dollars, such as salaries. So this is not what is going to be implemented. That's a separate decision that the city council will have to make. The education of that will start following my presentation in the public hearing of what that study has found. However, whatever we are going to implement, I believe needs to start with this city council. It's an issue that is of enormous importance that shouldn't be delayed any further. And so I intend, after you hear the study and I get and hear some of your feedback, whatever you may have to say, but I do intend to bring that back next week at your action meeting. Not implementing this figure, but something that makes sense for one-time sources, but recurring expenses, such as the salary study. Now, there's one other section that I want to talk about, and that's the expenditure side of the budget. If you would turn to page 29. And as I did with revenues, I want to do the same with expenditures to show you the bottom line. And if you look at total general fund expenditures, again, if you recall the revenue number, the number for 26 is 1624054. That's the same number that you see for expenditures, which simply means that the budget is balanced. But what are the significant numbers that make up that 1624054 recommendation? On page 30, salaries and wages, regular employees. This is the biggest number when you think about a $1.3 million budget in salaries and wages for regular employees. You see, for 2026, $400,421. The number is similar to the amended 2025 budget. This number does not take the classification and compensation study into account. So the biggest change is the 2.8% inflation factor. A budget is it's a plan, and it can quickly not be the reality. So even though I wanted to factor in and to show the 2.8% cost of living adjustment, that should be a function of keeping employees current with price increases, but it is a policy decision of the council. But now that we have a classification and pay study that hopefully you will be adopting, the principle of keeping that study and pay plan up to date is also factoring in inflationary adjustments. In actuality, once you adopt a pay implementation model, an inflationary impact will not be needed because it's already built into the model that the Carl Vinson Institute group will be talking about in just a few minutes. Similarly, for part-time employees, that 2.8% is shown, as was a factor for all of the other related salary expenditures. On page 31, another big item is group insurance, as it's labeled. That's essentially health insurance combined with dental and vision insurance for regular full-time employees. The council will recall that you approved, effective for October 1 term for the next year, a 4% increase in health insurance that runs through next September 30th. On page 32, I just want to point out the auditor fees have also been adjusted. We had a fairly significant increase in selecting a new auditor from the past auditor who had been in place for many years. So that was a increase of around 62% from $17,000 to $27,500 for 2026. There are a few line items that I want to point out as an example of contractors that we have been utilizing, but the appropriate assessment or renewal of contracts hasn't happened. On page 33, that permitting and inspection, and again, this is one of our strategic partners that falls under general government. I point out who that current contractor is, but that will be a contract that is subject to future review. Other professional services captures quite a number of partners that we have, and I provide the narrative for you. Some to LGC, who is new, working with the city. So that's for our finance operation. And I was actually expecting Mr. Salvatore and I another resource, that a person that will also be working with this has been hired by Sumter. So I am feeling really good about our finance operations. Got a long way to go, but we're going to have a bona fide finance operation with all of the pluses that go with it. I mentioned to you our ERP system. So when you see that 24,100 for Tyler Technologies, that's included in this number. Court services, a lot of those fees for the various roles played are captured in this area. And then miscellaneous other things, including pest control. On page 34, Sofa City, I don't like that as a line item, but I guess that's the former name for VC3. That gives you some idea of what we're spending for IT support services. I also point out that that's a service provider that's subject to future review by council. But all of these contracts should be coming to you on a regular basis. Cleaning services is another one that I listed here. We may be looking at doing that differently. This is actually this Right Time Cleaning Solutions is actually through the NETA, for those of you who may be familiar. On page 35, liability insurance. This is one that you're familiar, but another one where we had a pretty significant adjustment. This service for liability insurance for the city. We have a risk pool that's managed by the Georgia Municipal Association, the Georgia Interlocal Risk Management Agency. You know, we had around a 10% increase there. And finally, on page 39, a very important page that I want to capture, in my comments. The transfers and debt service, these are actually two pretty significant expenditures. Together, they're just over 100,000. In a couple of years, I believe we will be at the end of paying for those debt services. So I point that out to say that as we talk about funds that could be freed up for recurring expenditures, that's something to keep your eye on. The very last item is what is the bulk of the $295,000 fund balance that I've asked you to look at as a placeholder. So the approved 2025 budget modifications for classification and compensation study, I recommended $125,000. There were also adjustments of the full-time salaries for your 2025 appointments of the city manager, namely me and the public works director. So pretty significant numbers that had to be accommodated for a full year of funding as regular positions. And then the placeholder for community development services, 50,000. So together those make up 228,500. So if you were looking for an easy way to reduce that placeholder for fund balance, this is where you could look. My recommendation ultimately will hopefully be one that is responsible for both the recommendations that come from the class and comp study, but also sensitive to the need for matching recurring expenditures with recurring revenues. And so it comes back to the issue that I started with at the beginning, sustainability. The class and pay study is going to be an important priority in my opinion. Ways to address it that are more long-term, I believe, is through redevelopment and taking advantage of tools such as Downtown Development Authority or Development Authority. That's a decision that either this current council or the new council will have to make, I believe, in short order, hopefully. And annexation, just to bring you up to date. So my understanding is that DeKalb County, under the new chief executive officer, is really interested in moving DeKalb County ahead with what they call incorporation throughout DeKalb County. And so they are looking to the current cities to put forth their plans of annexation and to do it in a wholesome and group effort with the state legislative delegation and ultimately the state legislature. Originally, they were looking at as early as this upcoming legislative session of 2026. Based on where they are, from a realistic standpoint, they have moved that to 2027. So this is going to be an aggressive effort that the county is leading with the assistance of the DeKalb Municipal Association. Like I said, 3 of Pine Lake's representatives attended that meeting. The only update that I have given from a written standpoint, because they did want something in writing, and many of the other cities have actually given their maps and what they're interested in from an annexation standpoint. I reported that while annexation is an issue that has been considered seriously by the Pine Lake government, recently, that it wasn't anything that we had a recent discussion that we could put forth, but that I would be bringing the issue to the city council. I know that this has been an exhaustive issue. I don't know that it has been looked at from the way that I would be proposing the city council to look at it in the future. And that's probably with the professional, independent study based on some number of priorities that the city council may want to look at. In the context of where we are, and what I think is going to be crystal clear by the time you hear the class and comp study results, it is an issue of sustainability. And while we can look at redevelopment or downtown development authority or development authority, those are long-term prospects. But if we are to be a professionally run city with the kind of dedicated staff that we have had, I think, the privilege and quite frankly, luck of the kind of staff that we have, to be true to them, to be true to being a city, we've got to answer the question of how do we make it sustainable? The continuing high tax rate is not sustainable. The low salaries of employees isn't sustainable. And those are the two biggest issues that any city will ever encounter, quite frankly. So how do we make it work? And this is just superficial. But I happen to be a student of annexation. I wrote my thesis on annexation. And what normally comes with annexation, particularly when the state or the county is pushing it, is revenue sharing. That was the source of my topic as a thesis. The city of Charlottesville, Albemarle County. A revenue sharing agreement was a key part of it. Most of my career was spent in Broward County, Florida, where Fort Lauderdale is, but I worked in other cities. The county there had the same goal. They wanted to be out of the city business, where the county went in and provided services. And so 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, they took a bill to the legislature to incorporate through annexation or new cities for all of the county. And that's what exists today. And I was a big part of that being implemented. So I know how it works. And this will be the last thing that I say. One of the reasons why I think annexation has to be a consideration is the economies of scale. You went through a new charter, you wanted a fully professional government, city manager run, but there's the cost of the market. I use the city manager as an example. Now, my salary, which is a healthy salary for Pine Lake, is supported by a small segment of people. The next smallest city that I've ever managed was College Park, which is 13,000 people. So 14 or 15 times greater. I had a greater salary there. But the economy of scale, when there's more, when you look at population, as being a source of additional revenue, not just property tax. But I think Pine Lake, with good strategic targeted annexation as a quicker solution, can start to look at reducing this tax burden on its residents, get some economies of scale and other services that we provide. So while I will be asking the city council to approve a placeholder budget for some of the realities of what we've got to face, it will not be without really sharpening our tools to make this work and balancing what needs to be balanced from a resource standpoint, both on the expenditure side and the revenue side. And let's take advantage, let's be prepared to take advantage of the resources that are available that may not be our first choices, but that will be needed for sustainability.
Thank you, City Manager, for your thorough explanation, not only explanation, but presentation of the budget. You know, how having gone through now 10 cycles of budgeting for the city, this is definitely the most thorough and easily digestible version of the budget that I've ever seen. So those spreadsheets are intense. So thank you. And also, I just want to echo your comments about the ongoing sustainability of the city. I appreciate the presentation of solutions in the very, you know, from the debt services that are coming off of the budget potentially, the awareness of balancing recurring revenue with recurring expenditures and not relying heavily. We have a lot of non-recurring revenue in the bucket at the moment, and you know that's come up recurringly in conversation about not relying too heavily on that it will be spent quickly, as we're seeing. Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you for that presentation. I think it's really thorough. I know Council Member Bordeaux, Mayor Pro Tem, has, you know, even in responding to your email today about, don't forget we had the ARPA funds. But I think, you know, as a stopgap, as you're presenting, as a stopgap, we've got the general fund and it's a very healthy balance. If we are using that from a, you know, pattern level as a short-term solution while we get some long-term solutions into play, potentially annexation, you know, the DDA versus DA conversation that we're having tonight is jump-starting something that's very significant. You know, I think we can approach it from a position where we're not just, you know, our current tool or lever that we have in play is residential taxation. And I think we're all in agreement that the long-term strategy is not to just continue taxing higher and higher as the cost of everything continues to rise. So it was many years ago where the motion of moving toward a professionally run city, where that was set in motion with the leaving of our previous city administrator and then hiring our first interim city administrator, moving to city manager, then the charter change that happened, you know, and it's all been kind of slowly chipping away toward a vision that we knew would be necessary, or a foundation rather that we knew would be necessary in order to be able to implement tools other than the taxation that we had at our disposal. So this is all that very important groundwork. And I just feel really thankful. I think you're the right person for this seat. Yeah.
I'll make a comment. So this will be surprising to you. I do have a few questions about the budget, and I'm not going to ask them right now because I know that this is kind of a placeholder budget. I am very encouraged by what you just said about what DeKalb County is looking at. And I just want to give you just an idea of where we were when we looked at annexation before, and where we were is a totally non-professionally run city. One of the biggest reasons that we put annexation on the shelf is that we had no way to implement that. And I think, as the mayor has just noted, I mean, it's just wonderful that we are gotten to the point that we are at right now, which is the point we need to be able to participate in that kind of thing. And I think it would make a huge difference because, as you say, you got to do it for 700 people as well as 7,000 people. You got to do the same stuff. And I know we spent a lot of time looking at our commercial district, and we need to look at that as well, but that is going to take a lot longer, and it's really, I mean, I don't see a whole lot of revenue coming from that for, even if something were to really happen, nothing's going to come from that for 10 years or so. Annexation would make a huge difference right away. So I'm encouraged, and I think that having that fund balance available to us to kind of tide us over during that period of time is also is perfect. I mean, I think we've set ourselves up for success, not knowing what would be out there, and something is kind of falling in our lap. So thank you for sharing that with us, and I'm done.
Thank you. Any other? Yeah, let's start this end and we'll just go around.
Okay,
How
thank
does
you.
that work?
City Manager Hawthorne, this is well prepared, well done. The explanation of the line items is light years different than city budgets that I've seen in the past. That being said, and you have acknowledged the use of almost $300,000 of unassigned general fund revenues. That's almost 43% of our unassigned general fund. As you say, it is not sustainable. And that may not be the final number. I get what you say there. We have some discussion to take place around compensation and classification that will take place tonight to some degree. But the thing here is, if annexation is to take place in 27, revenues, we're going to wind up, I guess, in the same position that we're in here, deciding about the 2026 numbers and the use of unassigned general revenue funds. We're going to wind up in the same position next year, which is going to, if it's the same rough numbers, you're going to wind up using over the next 2 years 80 plus, maybe 85% of our unassigned general fund. I've heard you comment, rightly so, that our percentage of, let's say, excess revenue in the general fund in terms of our operating budget, is quite high. And it's quite high for a reason. And it took a long time for the city council and the mayor over the last 10 years to build up that buffer that we have. And we need that because we don't have other revenue streams that larger cities have. Even some small cities with 2,000 people or 3,000 people might have a robust commercial district with active shops and so forth. Maybe a supermarket. We just don't have that. So that those funds are necessary. And, I, for one, am not very comfortable taking 40+% of our unassigned general funds for the next 2 years. If this DeKalb County annexation plan goes through, it's wonderful, and I applaud it. And I think we're far better prepared to act on it now than we would have been in the past. But I'm nervous. I'm really nervous. Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldberg.
I describe my nervousness more as growing pains. When I think about everything that I've lived here 26 years to where we are now, this has been an evolution to the point where we no longer have a city run by having papers in someone's basement. And when that person is no longer in office, those papers disappear for whatever reason. To we now have a professionally run, professionally staffed, and there's still need for additional staff. So I'm concerned about how we continue funding all of that. I also think we need to think about how we tell that story to our residents to validate the purpose for that investment in our staffing. Because that's money, we're spending their money, our money. And to say we're spending X percentage of our budget on salaries, which from the information I have, most cities of our similar size are spending 50 to 75% of their budget on salaries. So I think we really need to be educating and adding that into the narrative you've already created, which is, this is just spectacular. Thinking again about, you've heard me, and I would question about where are we following up on? Are we getting everything we should be getting from the county? Commercial property taxes, have we sent that letter out to the tax commissioner yet about the appraisals on the apartments? Are we getting, when I see the line item for franchise fees, it doesn't, I'm not educated in those other than I was lucky to go with Councilmember Woods and get a check from Georgia Power 2 years ago for Georgia Power's franchise fees, which was almost all of what you have in the budget. So I'm wondering if we're getting all of our franchise fees and how we negotiate that. Because we get franchise fees from power, gas, telephone, landline, cell lines, cable. Are we getting all that? Are we getting adequate funding in terms of stormwater? I don't have a clue how that's figured out, but my guess is given that we're in a bowl of the surrounding communities, we're getting way more water than the rest of the area is, and we're taking care of that for the county. So I would wonder if we could look at how we negotiate that as well, because we need to maximize every potential revenue source. And I again, as a semi-knowledgeable person about how some of that works, and I'm at the very low end of the knowledge scale, I don't think we're getting enough in all of those areas, and I think we could get more. I would hope we could. And yet I also have faith that your staff and you are the people to do that, because we haven't had that type of person to go and negotiate on our behalf for that, to get our fair shake from the county, because I think we're forgotten in the county a lot of times. So again, I think the notion of how do we tell our story in terms of why we need to spend this investment, continue, because we've invested in our capitals this year. This coming year looks like we're investing in people. But then when we start bringing in annexation, we're also talking about having the conversation of what is Pine Lake. Because I would guess many people have a concern if we get any bigger, we're not going to be Pine Lake. How do we maintain what is Pine Lake if we continue growing, both our land and our people size? So I think that's also a great conversation to start having with our residents, whether in a town hall or other ways, to really let's talk about the vision of where we need to go and what that's going to involve. And I think that's the next part of our revolution.
Mhm.
So while I am feeling the growing pains, and with change comes both sides of the coin, the excitement and the fear. In my work, I taught people, you go to the fear. You confront it with confidence, you confront it with the team, and you do it strategically.
Mhm.
I think we're on the way. We got a lot of work to do, though.
Thank you. This direction, Councilmember Woods.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for this. This is very well done, very easy to understand, laid out great, looks wonderful. And my other council members here have mentioned a lot of things that I had kind of was thinking about, especially with the annexation, because I was on council, I know Jean was on council when we looked at annexation before, and that was kind of a, what would you call it, kind of a quick boot type of thing, because we had Greenhaven coming in, planning on just taking so much property at one time, it was gonna landlock us in. And I like the fact now that we have a chance to actually look into this and see how we can grow, because I just don't think raising taxes is not gonna be sustainable. Using our funding that's only gonna last so long, so we've gotta really, I think, look into some of these other areas to bring in, and like Councilman Goldberg was mentioning, making sure we're getting all of our monies coming in from other sources too, I think is very important, because that might be money that we're missing that will help keep that fund, having to dip into that funding. But I think the annexation will probably be our first item to look at to be able to help sustain the city. And I know that was one of the things we dealt with before, me and Jean, where people were like, are we gonna be Pine Lake if we're so large? You know, and I think we had several meetings, town hall meetings in regards to that. And it was kind of like we're on a scale, it's like we can't keep doing this, but we still want to be Pine Lake. How do we work this in? So,
What's the higher priority?
yeah, so it's so it's going to be a lot of healthy discussion, I think, to get this done. But it's going to be necessary, I think, for us to be able to continue as a city. And I think we're growing in the right direction. So thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rista. Councilmember Torrance.
I don't have much. Thanks again. This is fantastic. I have little tiny questions that I'll talk to you about at some point. As far as annexation goes, I think the only way that we're going to stay the same is if we change. And I know that's making sense, but the only way that Pine Lake is going to continue as Pine Lake is if we expand and grow and take the weight off of the residents that we have now. I had one question about the debt that we owe that I had asked you when we last spoke about. Were you able to find what that expenditure was for that we're still paying on? And the only reason I ask is because we're going to be talking about DDAs versus DAs later, and this was a decision that was made by our past DDA, and I'm just curious if that was worth the $1.5 million, I think, was the...
I think this.
Councilman, I think
city
really
attorney.
wish we would have that conversation in executive session, as it's a potential litigation matter. I don't really want to have that conversation in the public at this point. I mean, sometime in the future, it may become public information, but for right now, I don't think it is.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone, for your attention, and thank you to the staff for getting this together in record time. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. If anybody would like to come up and make a comment on the budget, now is your opportunity. Come on up. State your name, your address, and 3 minutes.
Hello, Mirali Basic, 734 Oak Hill Circle. I just kind of walked through this, and I did not see any budget for ground maintenance, street maintenance, lake and beach maintenance, Also, water supply for a lake. We had a lot of debates lately with the contractor and their proposals, but I did not see anything in the budget. And I think that is primary because this is what should make Pine Lake great. So, that's, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Stanley, do you have anything to, just in response to that, of where that, I know it's in there, but to speak to where that might be found?
Yeah, one of the things that I introduced when I originally presented the budget for as much progress as this document represents in doing real budgets, this is half of what we wanted to display in a real budget document. As an example, this does not break the budget down by departments. So even though there's a section that I called an operations guide, all of those numbers should be associated with what we're actually doing. The community investment plan, which I think really gets to her comments, that is kind of part two. We've got a lot of projects out there in the various funds, and we've got those funding sources, but we haven't gone into any detail. So we need a real capital improvement program, and that is coming. We're moving some of those projects ahead, but being able to document it so that the public will understand, as well as it being a policy document for the governing body, part two in all of this.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? You can come back up, that's fine. 3 minutes.
I apologize, but with full respect, I do not agree. I think that should be basis of the budget. We are fighting for maintenance schedule, cost of maintenance, so this place doesn't go downhill for 2, 3, 5 years since Raul is gone, and we do not have it. And now we have a public work. Now we have like a very functional government, and I think that delaying it, it's not right. I think we should have that maintenance schedule and how much it costs.
No, I agree.
Yeah, but I don't know why we don't have it in a budget, like why we just have a lump of sum.
Mayor,
Because
if I can
that's-
interject, I'm sorry.
Yes.
The statutory level of budgeting required by the state of Georgia for local governments is the department level. That is the level of budgeting that the city manager has proposed to the council. That is the lowest level that the council has the authority to allocate funds for the purposes of running the operations and functions of the city. Any further detail beyond that would violate the charter and violate the city's, state statute.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I'm gonna close the public hearing. Does that work, city attorney? Just close it, okay. Great, moving on to new business. The long-awaited classification and compensation study. And just as the context for this, I know we've spoken about this a lot over the past year. City Manager Hawthorne coming into the position, I don't want to speak for you, but immediately thought, okay, there's a lot of inequity in how positions are paid. There hasn't been a compensation study, as far as I am aware, ever, as we've discussed. And something that we see consistently, like we see it in my own company, where we're paying certain things and we have employees that have been there for a very long time, and then we need to hire for a position, but the market has changed and we end up hiring new positions at a higher rate than people that have been there for a long time. And so we're constantly needing to go back and adjust ranges to be on par with market and make sure that people are having fair and equitable pay. So the fact that we haven't done that is a major oversight, and I think speaks again to your experience. As you've said many times, as we all are aware, we have an incredible staff who, for some reason, work in Pine Lake at much below market value, and that's amazing. And we've also experienced major challenges in filling positions with the rates that we've offered in the past. For instance, we went 3 years without a public works supervisor because we were unable to fill that position. So this is important not just for bringing our current staff up to par with the region that we're in and continuing to have a professionally run city, but it's really important to be able to remain competitive and attract the amazing kind of talent that we currently have.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And just an introduction, because you have not actually met the consultant, but for the benefit of the public, the city council chose the Carl Vinson Institute of Government to do this very important study. I want to introduce you to Sam Traeger, who is the representative of the Carl Vinson Institute of Government.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sam Traeger. As Carlton introduced me, I work for the University of Georgia and the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. I've been there about 2 years in the Talent Insights Division, and my primary responsibility is doing classification compensation studies for cities, counties, and state government organizations. I'm sorry, thanks, Ned. So we started working with the city, and if you want to switch to the next page, we started out with some project objectives for us to sort of guide the project. And we wanted to review and write job descriptions for all your current positions covered under your personnel system. We wanted to then evaluate and grade those positions that'll sort of set up using our factor evaluation system. So we ended up assigning a point value to each position, and that helps establish internal equity of your pay system. We collected and analyzed survey data that was publicly available, survey data, and we then formatted that and established some ways to see where you guys compare to the market. We're working to help with compensation strategies. One of the things Ms. Truffin said was that it's great to put this in, but you also have to maintain this over time, because pay is always a moving target. And we, of course, work with the city throughout this, and you'll see some of that in a few minutes. So we started out developing job descriptions and classifications for each position. And by doing that, we started out by sending out what we call a position description questionnaire to each employee, and they filled that out and told us about their jobs. There are 12, and from there we developed 12 different job descriptions for each employee in the city. We covered each employee in the city. We then, as I mentioned, used our factor evaluation system, which is a 10-point system that evaluated our jobs and applied those and put them into pay grades 11 through 26, with 11 being lowest, 26 being the highest, of course. And there are a few questions, and I'll get to those kind of at the end, that we still sort of need to sort out a little bit as we get to finalize this document. This is what we call our position grade analysis, or PGA, and it shows that internal hierarchy as we graded the jobs based on their duties and responsibilities as employees described to us in the position description questionnaire. You can see that what you see is the positions within each department and their pay grade that we looked at as part of our study and where they ended up. Once we had that in place and knew what your internal equity looked like and knew what your jobs looked like, we then went out and did a wage survey and that salary study. We base that off of the Department of Community Affairs salary data. They do an annual wage survey every year and publish that on their website. And the best way for us to break this down was the DCA divides the state into 12 different districts. District 3 covers DeKalb County, but also most of metro area, which is where you're also competing in for the market. This is the group of the group of cities that we ended up including in our survey data. We tried to focus on cities with a population about 7,500 or less. You can see that there are some in DeKalb, some in Gwinnett, some on the south side of town as well. But this was the group that best met our market data we felt for the city of Pine Lake. And we're able to use benchmark positions. These are positions that are within your city that we use to sort of represent your pay system as a whole. We don't survey every job typically, although Pine Lake is small and we captured most of them. But we use jobs that we are able to use to represent the city as a whole in the marketplace and make comparison that way. A couple of key terms that I use throughout this is market, which is basically the average salaries for various positions in the survey data. And we develop our market line from those averages. We also look at pay practice, which is an internal calculation of where you're paying your employees now. And ultimately, we're able to compare the market by using pay practice, compare the market to your employee pay, and determine the difference between where you are now and where the market is, and how we can go about getting you closer to the market. You'll see sort of the summary data of the jobs that we surveyed on this next page, which is page 9, and if you have the paper handout. And it shows what the survey said was the minimum of salary range and what the maximum was for the jobs that we included as benchmarks. You can also see what we considered the average, which is we use the midpoint of those ranges to be considered average pay and where you'd like to be. Next to it, in that other column, it says internal pay. This is what you're actually paying your employees right now at that level. And what the difference is to market, and the percentage ahead or behind that job is compared to market. And you can see those are some pretty big discrepancies over on the right-hand side with percentage differences.
When you
Yes.
say difference to market, is that market the midpoint?
Yes, that's just the market,
Okay.
the midpoint.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Sure. This sort of graphically brings it all together. I'm kind of a picture person. And there's a lot kind of represented on this page, but let me walk you through that. The blocks that are on there, the squares, those individual blocks represent where your employee pay is. I talked about what pay practice is a minute ago, which I used to represent the city's pay, comparing it to market. And that blue line, the bottom blue line, is where your pay practice is. The market line then is that black line that's in the middle, the second one down, is represented where we think the market is. The minimum pay that's represented by the survey data is the one that's right above your pay practice line. So that's the second line up. When we measured all those out, we saw that your pay trails the market by about 35%. And when we compared it to the minimum, we saw that your pay trails the market by about 13%. So we wanted to give you what the real world outlook is. If we wanted to get you truly to 50% of market, which is the midpoints, and where market is, and what that looks like. As I said, your pay right now is 35% behind market. In order to move, we want to move the employee pay to that market rate and develop new pay tables. And when we analyze all those costs without considering benefit costs, which there are percentages associated with any increase in pay, we came out at about $223,000 for that moving to market. Based on some earlier conversations with the city manager, I knew we wanted to provide you options because I wanted to be able to give you something that you can consider for adoption. So that's where it gets into the second option that follows. And remember, I showed you where that minimum market line was, where people were paying at the minimum of their pay ranges. And I tied that back to the minimum and did the study based off of where market was if we just wanted to get you to minimum of the market right now. And that's about 13.4% behind minimum. And we want to move your employee pay to that minimum, develop pay tables off of that, which is a little bit of an issue, and I'll get to that in a second. But just getting employees to minimum costs about $63,000. We also went ahead, and looked at some other options that you could consider as part of this study. And that would be to give an additional $6,000 to each of those positions that fall farthest behind the market, raising your total to about $99,617. Since she is sitting here, one of the other options is one of the positions that's farthest behind market is your police chief position, and if there is money available in the budget, you may want to consider offering some additional funds for that position compared to what we saw in the market rate. On page 14 is actually where pay would end up based off of giving employees a 13% pay increase, and then where that additional $6,000 might go to, and what those employees' new pay is out in the far right column. There's also, I know you also have some part-time employees. One I know is in the police department, and some other part-time employees here and there who are not seasonal employees. We did not cover seasonal employees, but that recommendation would also apply to them, that there could be a 13% increase for those employees if you considered that option as well. We wanted to develop a pay table for you guys to look at and hopefully consider for implementation. And that's shown on this page 15. You can see that some of the pay ranges, when you check back against the grades, some of the employee pay still falls below the minimum of the pay grade. And one of the major things when you're implementing pay tables is you move employees to the minimum. But doing that, it would cost an additional $30,000 or so. I think that this is something that you can update and amend and look at for market rates and kind of grow into possibly over the next couple of years. So this is longer range implementation. It's one of those things is how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And this might be a little bit of a longer range potential implementation for you to consider as getting to this pay table. I also wanted to point out a couple other things for your consideration as you go through this. MIT publishes an annual survey of livable wages. They cover every county in Georgia. They break it down by cost of living, from rent to food to other expenses. And if you look at the minimum livable wage for a single person with no children living in DeKalb County, that's about $53,700 a year is what they need at a minimum to live in DeKalb County. And that's just something for you to consider as you're looking at this data. Some of your salaries don't quite make it there yet, but it's something that you keep an eye on long-term as well. And this is the page on page 17, the next one. This is what that page actually looks like off of the MIT website. It's an interesting website. They do this study annually and publish this data. So this was as of February of 2025. So needless to say, it's probably gone up a couple percentage points since then. The other thing that Ms. Hawthorne suggested was that you need to maintain this over time. And there are a couple of ways to do this. You can maintain it by use of the Consumer Price Index, which is pretty common in local government. Over time, I've grown more fond of what's called the the Employer Cost Index, which is also published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that measures how much employers are raising employee wages each year. You can see there that over the last 24 years, we plotted it against each other, and the ECI has averaged about 3% per year, whereas the Consumer Price Index is about 2.66. The good part about the ECI, and I'm trying to recommend that as an option for consideration by more organizations, is that the ECI is a smoother ride over time. It's a little bit higher, but you're not faced with 2022. You're not faced with an 8%. There's a city in Metro Atlanta who is always very proud of tying their employees' increases to the CPI plus the pay performance component. And that was great until 22 rolled around and city council had to tell their employees, yeah, we really didn't mean we always tie our pay to the CPI. So picking an index and sticking with that, I think long-term is important, and that helps to administer the plan on an ongoing basis. There are a couple of outstanding issues. As I mentioned, increasing pay for part-time employees by 13%. We've had some difficulty evaluating and probably need to get some more information as pending with the budget about the public works coordinator and the administrative coordinator positions. Those are not included in our position grade analysis. They were part-time positions at the time. The city manager and I have also had some conversations, and we're working on looking at the court clerk position and making sure we have that in the right position as far as internal equity goes. And I think I've presented a whole lot of information to y'all.
You made it very simple. Thank you.
It's
Digestible.
Very nice.
Thank you. Are there any questions that I can answer for y'all about the data?
Yeah, let's start over here.
Yes, thank you. It's a great report.
Thank you.
Is there a reason that you zeroed in on District 3, other than the fact that we reside in District 3?
Right.
But you can also sort the Department of Community Affairs searchable database by city. You can sort it by population, 0 to 1,000, 1,000 to 2429, 2,499, and maybe blend that type of population versus district.
Right.
Because I don't think there's really any way that the city of Pine Lake can realistically afford, as good as our employees are, and they are wonderful, afford to compete with the city of Decatur, the city of Avondale, Brookhaven, Atlanta. I mean, really, that's just, to me, it's not a valid comparison unless you blend population from other areas into your analysis.
And to address that, I think that a couple of thoughts went into it. The District 3 is the metro area, as you said.
Yeah.
And as much as you might not think that you are, those are the people you're competing with. You are competing in the same market, in the same pool for police officers. You're competing in the same market, in the same pool for I think you said the public works position was a long time to fill that position. It is the same market. And even potentially, you're competing with larger cities besides Decatur. But you're competing with, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for a police officer to drive to Milton or Alpharetta, take a job as a police officer. They work 12-hour shifts 3 to 5 days a week. That's not out of the ordinary. And they get take-home cars to go back and forth. So I think that that is the market that you're playing in. Could we have gone and gotten some folks outside of DeKalb County and into Rockdale, Conyers area? those are still in the same marketplace. Yeah, we could have looked at those, and we could have looked at the sortable data, but I tried to keep that data small and just recognize that. If you look back at the data, the starting salary minimum that we saw from this data for a police officer, for example, was about $46,000 a year. Any place you look online for police officers, their pay is north of 50. We try to keep it small. We try to keep it right size for the city of Pine Lake and take that in consideration with this by including the smaller organizations within District 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Question?
I think thank you for this. This is comprehensive and not surprising coming from the Vincent Institute, so I appreciate your efforts and you being here first off. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think our catch-22 is, yes, we're Metro Atlanta, but we're also the smallest city in Metro Atlanta. So how do we balance that? And then also that we're the smallest city, we have smaller staff numbers, but they probably do more work than a comparable job in a bigger city
They wear a
because
lot of
they're
hats.
wearing multiple hats.
Mhm.
So I think we've got a lot of balancing to try to figure out. I had some data from DCA for calendar year 24, which was the last year I was able to get it for comparable cities of our size, and the average sum of expenditures on personnel was $420,000 plus annually, which we're a little bit above right now if you include compensation for benefits. But knowing Georgia as it is, cities that are 500 to 999 are small towns in areas where cost of living is profoundly less. So I think our challenge is how do we figure out how to afford it? And how much can we afford? And where do we want to go? For me personally, I think this is about, again, making a long-term investment, and I would like to think that we can maybe start this process, not go all the way full bore, both feet in the deep end kind of thing, more of a gradual thing, and letting our staff know this is the direction we're going. But it would, like doing our development, DDA or DA, annexation, it's going to take some time. So what can we do to continue building that sort of loyalty and let folks know that we appreciate them, we want to invest in you, but we're going to do it systemically and strategically.
And sustainably.
Yeah, the 3 S's. So this is great because I think it lays out some really clear data points for us to look at, and I appreciate that. My one question is what exactly, and this is more for you, City Manager Hawthorne, where does Missy fit into this? Because what's her job title? I didn't necessarily see this here.
She is the administrative coordinator.
It's in the outstanding matters slide.
So that was, because I saw that as for Public Works.
And that is Danita Robinson, who's
Right.
the Public Works Coordinator at this point. And speaking of wearing a lot of hats, Ms. Robinson certainly does. And the other one is, I have her as Wilma Martin, but I know she goes by Missy,
Okay.
as the administrative coordinator. Is that accurate?
Okay, thanks, thank you.
Great, thank you. Jean?
So one thing, I thank you again also for this information. It's very clear, and I really appreciate it. Just one thing that I want to put out, and we don't talk about benefits here. One of the things that we have done, I know it seems like we haven't spent a lot of time and money on our staff, keeping our staff up, but we have changed benefits, increased benefits, and that was kind of a makeshift way of getting people a little more satisfaction. We have, I don't know how it compares, and I guess I would like to, I'm wondering if there's some way we can compare benefits to without doing a whole study, but comparing benefits, because we do have, for example, I believe we allow 12 sick days a year. And we have 12 holidays a year. We have vacation. We have a pension plan that is, people do not have to participate. We pay it completely. Medical. We actually have a 35-hour work week. That was actually put in at some point to mitigate some of the fact that we couldn't pay people. So we built up this benefit package. And that's not to say that, and I'm not saying at all that I think that we don't need to bring these salaries up. I just am wondering how much of a difference that makes. Is that something that you look at in other studies, or is?
We did not look at that as far as this study went, and we haven't done a benefits study per se in quite some time that I'd have decent data on. I know that Councilmember Goldberg brought up 50 to 70% total compensation accounts for 50 to 70% of budgets. That's probably about right as what we're seeing in other organizations. Certainly a little bit north of 50 is about what we're seeing, especially in the smaller you are, the larger that number probably gets. So I think that's probably a good gauge if you're looking at something of how much is your general fund budget is spent on salaries and benefits.
And that included benefits, what
Yes.
you're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
So I think that's a good guide.
And then I would also throw in, people are not working in mold-infested buildings anymore. We have upgraded our working conditions profoundly, which were antiquated, to say the least.
Okay, that's all. I just wanted it to make sure that that's something that we consider as we're looking at this, that we may not be able to go to market rate.
Right.
We talk about minimums, but minimums plus the benefits package that we have, plus bringing those up is going to raise up those benefit packages.
Right.
All of those things will go up as we increase salaries, so.
You're absolutely correct. And one of the things that I get to say now that I'm more in a consulting role to city councils, and I was talking with one of your newly elected council members back there, that as they have to go to mandatory training as a newly elected council member. And one of the things that I get to say in front of that group is, you're really in the people business. There might be other things that are driving what you want to do with the city, but at the end of the day, a lot of your money, most of your money goes to pay people and what the jobs that they do for you as part of the city.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I had a similar response to this, is as Councilmember Goldberg, which is, the question in my mind isn't whether or not this is something that we need to invest in. I'm a very strong believer in investing in your people. The ROI, if you put it in business terms, I think is nearly immeasurable. But the question becomes, how do we pay for it? That's the challenge or the solve that we need to really do. And I think all of the things we've talked about in the budget, the forward plans that we have, that we've actively been working toward, this next presentation that we're about to have, are all toward that end. And obviously, I think we need to be incremental and strategic in how we take this on and what positions, I think we have some decisions to make in terms of how we approach it in a way that's not going to cause a lot of budgetary whiplash. But I think that we can come up with those solutions. I feel confident in that. So thank you for your presentation. This was really
Thank you.
easily understood and laid out well. Do you have any additional?
Just wanted to thank you. It was very easy to follow along with and understand. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for my own benefit, when you're talking about the market value and you talk about District 3, but then the 12 small cities, are we talking the market being what District 3 average is, or those 12 cities within.
It's the 12 cities within.
Okay.
We use District 3 as one of the factors, and then I sorted by population within that DCA data to get to where, to be honest, till there was a reasonable amount of data that we could use and base the market line on.
Okay, I just want to make sure that like we're not competitive with like Atlanta, because we can't be. Like we can't be competitive with like cities that are 10 times our size. And a lot of what we're looking at is the market versus minimum. And we're just kind of a minimum size city. We're a quarter square mile.
Right.
So our public works director has a quarter square mile, not, you know, the many miles and like the number of people he directs. So I think we need to make sure that we keep the scope of where we are realistic as to who we are. Mr. Hawthorne, you mentioned that we were talking about naming those heads of departments on top of their other titles. Would that be an internal thing, or would that be a thing that we would then need to look at as a pay title?
So there are two parts. One would be the official table of organization. I'll refer to it. That's an amendment to the Code of Ordinances recognizing the departments, and that's charter required. What I anticipate as the next step is my bringing to you a plan of implementation that takes into account certainly the options that that Sam has talked about, that combined with your comments, and your comments are really, we need to get there perhaps in an incremental but certainly sustainable way. And so that's my chore. Now, I will say that this has been an effort that we've been looking at for the last year. And we're also looking at the eve of this city council's tenure. So my intent is to bring a recommendation that captures all of your comments in a week.
That's our last meeting of the
It is your last meeting,
and
and
you have to pass a budget.
have to pass a budget, and I think this classification and comp study is this city council's task. You may not get there, but I'm going to try and present something that I think will get you there and be fair to employees.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so now our last order of new business. We've got a presentation about the Development Authority versus the Downtown Development Authority as tools for development. How many times can we say development? A lot.
Talking about those two items for days and days. Mayor and council, it's my very great privilege and honor to introduce my good friend and colleague, Jim Elliott. I first met Jim Elliott when I was a very baby lawyer clerking for Dross Fitzpatrick in the Middle District of Georgia. He was quite young then, and I was, of course, a lot younger than I am now. But over the last 33 years, Jim has taught me a great deal about what we do as local government lawyers. He has retired from the city of Warner Robins, where he was a city attorney for many decades. He now is of counsel with the regional law firm Butler Snow. Butler has offices in Macon, here in Atlanta, and across the Southeast. Jim's going to talk about the differences and similarities between development authorities and downtown development authorities. Jim has extensive experience with both those, in his practice in Warner Robins and elsewhere. His law firm does a great deal of bond work, which is very central to both of those things, because you've got to be able to move money around to make either one of them work efficiently. So with that relatively brief introduction, Mr. Elliott, here's his presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Mayor and Council, pleasure to be in front of you tonight. My first visit to your fair city, so
Thank you for being here.
Welcome.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So, again, Chris sort of explained my background. He reached out to our firm, actually to one of the partners who was unable to be here, and what he explained to us is he wanted us to sort of do a presentation on downtown development authorities, how that differs from development authorities, the scope of powers that those two groups have as you choose, it sounds like from what I've heard, to move forward with some revitalization or some development in your city. And so that's what I'm here to do. I'm probably more comfortable with you asking questions, and I'll answer them as best I can, but I'll be glad to move forward if you will. So let's talk about DDAs, or downtown development authorities, first. You can go to the next slide if you will. So downtown development authorities have typically in every city have a more limited geographical jurisdiction, and that is what's defined in the state law as development and revitalization and redevelopment of what's called the central business district. And what that central business district is your decision. I mean, you're the decision makers. You define that area. Chris alluded to the fact that most of my career was in Warner Robins, and if anyone's been to Warner Robins, there's not a downtown. It developed sort of linearly, and so that was a real challenge for us to have the proper jurisdiction, because we didn't have a little town square at the courthouse like a lot of typical communities have. But that again is your decision. So I mean, over my career, city governments, governing authorities of city governments will decide, well, we originally thought this was our central business district. Now the boundaries have grown, or perhaps not. So I think the point I really simply want to make about all that is that that's your decision to decide where this downtown development authority would have its jurisdiction, because its powers are limited to those, with one exception I'll talk about a little bit later. So this is established by one of the provisions of state law acting pursuant to the Georgia Constitution. All of the development authorities, I'm going to use that term kind of generically right now, have some constitutional goals, which is to address commerce, industry, and employment opportunities within whatever the jurisdiction is. And so those are the purposes for which any of these kind of entities exist, and so we'll talk about a little bit of that moving forward, if you will. So again, the projects is a statutory term that's contained in the DDA law, and you can see that they make decisions about projects that promote, again, trade, commerce, industry, or employment opportunities. And you'll see the last bullet says that all projects must serve a public benefit. So I'm going to just remind you to go back, I would say 10 years, and I'm always underestimate when I think about the past. But you'll remember the pretty well-discussed and landmark decision of the U.S. Supreme Court in Kelo versus City of New London, which is, the dispute in that case was over the city's right to use its powers of eminent domain or condemnation to acquire Ms. Kelo's property that was going to be used as a part of a construction of a Pfizer pharmaceutical corporate headquarters. She contested whether that was a valid public purpose for the taking. That case goes all the way through the federal court system, ends up at the U.S. Supreme Court, which said revitalization and economic development is a valid public purpose. So I think that's just important to point out, that sometimes you might think that a DDA will do things like, some examples I've heard over the years, facade grants to make the downtown look nicer, if you will. And so long as the DDA's end goals can be arguably met, can arguably reach one of these statutory and constitutionally based criteria and goals, then they're acting within the scope of their authority. So DDA projects have to be within, again, this central business district of the downtown development area. And there's some conditions where they can move outside that boundary. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. That's if the DDA is also designated as the Urban Redevelopment Agency. So Urban Redevelopment Agency is a separate title or separate chapter in Title 36 of Georgia law. That's neither here nor there, but it does give broad powers with the end goal of, again, redevelopment of areas that need to be addressed. So again, I just want to emphasize that, and perhaps, did I understand from the conversation earlier that there was a DDA in Pine Lake in the past? Okay, so frankly, the fact that you activated that entity, it continues to exist. I mean, you probably have to go back and refurbish it, if you will, and revitalize, but there'll be a resolution more than likely somewhere in the minutes of the city that will designate what was then defined by the governing authority in place at that time as this downtown development district, if you will. And then again, and I'll just touch on that briefly, should you choose to authorize, to create, again, this urban redevelopment agency under the urban redevelopment law that expands the physical boundaries of the downtown development authority's jurisdiction to address those revitalization projects.
Okay.
One thing I want to say about it, it's a problem, it's an issue I've noticed during my career in local government. There are a couple things I'm going to speak, this is just my personal opinion, not statutorily based, but I think it's really important that the Downtown Development Authority acts on your behalf and in your best interest and with your goals. I mean, I've seen in a handful of cities, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen sometimes. I think Chris would agree with me that DDAs sort of take on a power trip of their own and they kind of go off on a tangent. And I think that's problematic. And what I'm leading up to is that the ability of the city to basically fire the DDA is very questionable. There's been some case law around the state, not very much. The best way you control that is appointing people that believe what y'all believe and have the same goals that y'all have, and so I think that's really important. The other thing, and I will say this to the clerk, is what I see happen in a lot of cities is, so DDA as well as the downtown, as well as development authority terms are staggered, and the purpose for that, from the legislature's perspective, is we don't want a wholesale new body coming in. We want there to be some continuity and some institutional knowledge, if you will. Somebody's got to keep up with when those terms end. That happens a lot, that people just aren't really paying attention, or there's nobody that's sort of designated to be in charge of that. The statutes with regard to both of these say that members continue to serve until their successors are properly appointed. So I just want to urge you to kind of set up a system that kind of stays on top of all that as you move forward with the decisions to do that. So again, I don't want to talk very much about this because it's sort of a second step, if you will, but again, you have the ability to also designate a DDA or Downtown Development Authority as the Urban Redevelopment Agency, and so they have some additional powers and separate powers. One of the advantages of a DDA and a Development Authority and an Urban Redevelopment Plan is that it gives the city the ability to pick and choose who buys property. Let's say you have some city-owned property that you've acquired through tax sale or whatever the case may be. You really don't want something that's going to continue blight or whatever the issue may be. You have a vision for what you think is a proper thing to go. The general rule, and again, your city attorney's familiar with this, is that we as city governments have to sell property to the highest bidder for cash, either by auction or by sealed bid. So using these authorities gives a lot of discretion to these different entities to be able to pick and choose. And so somebody comes in and maybe they're not going to pay as much up front for a piece of property, but they have a proposal that's rolled into their urban redevelopment plan that fits what your vision is, if you will, for the particular area of town. So 7 directors of the Downtown Development Authority, and as I mentioned, staggered terms, and I think that's important. So if you're kind of starting over, I think the statute says, and I won't quote it specifically, but you point some members for 2-year terms, some for 4-year terms, and some for 6-year terms, if I remember that correctly, yeah. So that's how that kind of implements that whole rotation, if you will. You're allowed what's called the power of self-appointment of one of your members, and so you could appoint any of the elected officials to serve, and that person serves in that capacity until they are no longer in office. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if the successor is not yet appointed, the director continues to serve until replaced. So that's why I think it's important to sort of stay on top of that. So who can serve on a DDA? And this is a little bit tricky because I think Chris would agree with me that there used to be a much more specific definition in the DDA statute, which for whatever reason the legislature sort of got away from. So they speak in terms in today's version of the statute of people having an economic interest in, again, the downtown development or the central business district of the community. And so I've listed some of the things here. You've got that in your handout, I noticed earlier. Directors have to be residents of the city or owners or operators of businesses within this downtown business district. And they're then required also to be a resident of the county or some combination of that. Yes, Mayor?
This is a place where we had a lot of discussion last time, and there were a couple of questions that came up about this. If I may just
Sure,
ask
of course.
those while we're on that topic. One was our current zoning, which we may need to revisit at some point, includes, it's commercial for the Rockbridge Road corridor outside, you know, I'm pointing that way.
Came out that way.
Yeah. And then there's a transitional commercial district on Poplar, the next street up, that has a mix of some residential and some, it has the ability through zoning to be commercial, and there's some commercial properties that connect to Rockbridge. But one of the questions is, do property owners who do not have a business in that district necessarily, but have a financial interest because they own property, would they be able to make up one of those four?
I think so, because I think living within the district is specifically provided for in the statute. So,
Okay.
yeah, because that's very common as our downtowns expand, that happens, that you have residential property that's probably going to become commercial at some point.
Yeah,
Or,
Great.
you know, the fad of the day is mixed use, and so you have residential mixed in with commercial. So I think that
Perfect.
meets the requirements of that.
that was kind of the understanding, I think we walked away with, but there was some question. And then two other uses that we were questioning was, we've got our church, the big church property, which is in our primary commercial area, and the post office. Would representatives from either of those organizations, you know, I think you could argue that they have a vested financial interest in what happens in the area. Would either of those count toward representation?
I would be more comfortable with the church being one of those parties. I don't know that I think the post office, because of
It's
its
federal.
quasi-governmental
Mhm.
nature.
Okay,
That's my, off the top of my head,
great.
answer. But I think it's an interesting thing, because again, to your point, I mean, a church that's in the middle of that area is affected by what goes on around it, certainly. I think you wanna,
But regardless, they would have to be live in DeKalb County. Is if I'm interpreting what you have written up
can you
there
back that
correctly.
up? I think that is one of the requirements that.
Yeah, one director must reside,
I'm sorry.
Well, one director
may reside outside of the county
so
if
have
they
to
own a
be-
business.
They have to be
Yes.
a proper business owner and
Uh-huh.
reside in DeKalb County.
Mhm.
So being that we're so close to the county line,
Mm-hmm, that could be a
that may
problem.
be.
And Fulton.
Could I jump in with one question?
Yeah, please.
You mentioned early in your conversation that we can define the boundaries
Yes,
of what is constituted as the downtown.
yes, you're the decision maker.
So
on that.
like can we say the host city of Pine Lake, because it's literally 1 square
I've
mile?
seen that happen, actually, so, you know, when there's kind of an unusual mix of residential and commercial in the community, I mean, again, the statute just gives you the authority to make that decision, so.
So that was one of the, like, decision points for me was like DA would cover the host city, but DDA was more targeted, but we could, under the auspices of how we define what our area is, include the same area that the DA would cover by having a DDA.
I believe you can, and again, I'm gonna.
Yeah,
defer to
the
city attorney.
I appreciate you deferring to me, even though you probably know this better than I do. The distinction's gonna really boil down to what do you want the authority to do? And when Jim gets to the place about talking about the differences in the two, the types of projects that each kind of authority can accomplish, they're not vastly different, but they're
But they are.
substantively different.
Yeah.
So the makeup of who the board is a concern. What you want the board to accomplish is a concern. Having a voting voice on the board as one of your elected colleagues is available for a downtown development authority. It is not available for a development authority. You can have an ex officio member on the development authority, but they can't vote. So there could be a communication link, but there's not a direct policy control like you have a little bit more of with the downtown development authority. So all of those microscopic details in this discussion are going to ultimately matter in what policy decision the council makes.
Yeah.
What we asked Butler Snow to do and what Mr. Elliott's trying to accomplish is give you the 15,000-foot view of that conversation. And then once you're comfortable at that level of detail, then we can barrel down deeper into the details and decide what you want to accomplish and how you want to go about accomplishing it. Does that make sense and answer your question?
Yes, and I have one last question, which I think was going back to the composition of the board. 7 people, what if, to start off, can we start with 4? Can we start with 3? Do we have to have 7?
The statute says shall be 7, I'm pretty sure.
Because I think somewhere in the last presentation said up to 7, or a minimum of 7.
Development authorities
Yes.
have some discretion between
Yeah,
7 and 9.
Right, the development authorities are 7 and 9, downtown development authorities have to be 7,
It
you
says
have to maintain that number.
Okay.
So in the past, we've had issues, and we, may or may not be an issue at this point, just with the changes of the city, but we've had issues keeping a development authority, a downtown development authority, staffed with board members or directors. So one of the questions that came out of the last time is, what happens if we could only get 4 people, or people roll off and we can't find replacements? Does that make it defunct? Or,
Well, I don't think so, but again, I feel like even if terms expire, but you don't reappoint somebody else, technically those people remain members of the authority until you can find somebody.
okay. So as long as we can get 7 initial members, and it doesn't specify how active they need to be, is that true?
No, I mean, really.
Okay,
So one could be council.
one could be
So we need
council, so
6.
6, and then one could be church, and one could be a residential property owner.
We could actually.
We could probably get 3 business
We may actually be
owners.
able to replace the existing unexpired members of the old DDA.
Yeah,
Technically, they're still the directors.
Yes, that's right.
if we know who they are. Did we ever figure that out? It exists. If it's you, come forward. Okay, please continue, thank you.
To the city attorney's point, I'll say this, I mean, throughout the statute that deals with creation of and existence of downtown development authorities, it doesn't specifically say they're limited to revitalization and renovation, but that seems to be kind of an underlying theme, and I think that's what most downtown development authorities around the state do, is an effort to revitalize their central business districts, and they're not precluded from, taking actions that enable a new retail business to come to the community or some of that sort, but I think that's kind of the distinction he was alluding to, is that, again, DDAs kind of have a different focus, and I think, so there's some mandatory DDA training, and I think, and the Carl Vinson Institute does most of that around the state, and I think that's probably a lot of their focus.
Mhm.
Jim, could I ask you a quick question about, just lost it.
I'll be
Okay, okay. Oh, yeah, here it is. Annexation. You may have heard the city manager mention that DeKalb County has interest in perhaps approaching or partnering with cities to annex the unincorporated areas of the city. If we have a DDA that is designated as either our existing commercial corridor or the whole city, whatever it may be. And then we wind up annexing a larger area. Let's say it stretches down to Memorial Drive and, you know, encapsulates Hairston and gives us the Walmart and other pieces. Can you have a commercial district designated that is non-contiguous?
That word is not used anywhere in the statute, so I think you can have different areas. I think you would define that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, if you had a big rectangle and only the circumference of it was commercial, everything inside is residential. Can you designate that?
Chris and I'll have to look at that one.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't. Again,
I'm just throwing it out there.
There's nothing in the statute that speaks in terms of that district being.
Contiguous or non-contiguous.
There's
Okay.
at least an argument to be made, and I say this with great deference to the person who used to teach local government law at my law school. So there's an inference to be made in the Downtown Development Authority Code that it is a confined area that is more of the traditional county seat, city square kinds of area. I mean, that is not written down anywhere, but if you read it in its context, it has that flavor to everything that they describe about what a DDA is to accomplish. That being said, the Supreme Court of Georgia is very much about just applying the statute as it is written and not trying to understand the context in which it arose, so they will not likely bind cities to that sort of thematic sense that is in the code. You know, and not being in the tea leaf reading business, but trying to advise clients about this question, it is a safer choice to have it be one contiguous area. It is not out of the bounds, as Jim says, that it could be non-contiguous areas. If you're gonna have it as a urban redevelopment authority or urban redevelopment agency as part of its function, then it has to be contiguous because the URD has to be contiguous.
Okay.
So that's why I say that the detail matters, but we're still trying to learn to crawl in this business between you and I. So the goal here is to make sure that you understand the basics before I overwhelm you with the level of choices and details that's available.
Okay.
So what you're saying is we're asking some questions that
We're
maybe
not there yet.
would be better saved for you down the road.
I don't know that if you have the question, I never say there's a bad question. I've never told any of you that there's a bad question. So I wouldn't say don't ask them. I just say you may not have sufficient information in order to understand what the answer to it is at this point. And that's a harsh thing to say, and it's a harsh thing to hear, but it's an even harsher thing for me to have to try to say, because y'all are very smart people, and you're jumping ahead of with great trepidation with all 6 of you. So, where we're trying to get in this multi-layer conversation is, you got the 60,000 foot view from me at your last retreat. You got a little bit further in the weeds when I'm going to lose his name because it just went out of my head.
We know who you're talking
Yep.
Cartersville, Jim. Frank Jenkins. Thank you.
Teamwork.
See, yeah, mnemonics. Anyway, you got a little more detail with Mr. Jenkins. You're getting more detail with the Butler Snow presentation. And then by the time we get ready to make choices, there'll be another level of detail that'll lay out, all right, here's all the choices and all the decision tree points that you've got available. how mired in the details do you want to be?
Great.
And that's a choice, right? All of it is choices. And, you know, as I said in my introduction, Jim knows his stuff as well as anybody in the state. And knowing that the ins and outs of the two kinds of choices is really the focus of this conversation, and not just the details of how a DDA would work. Because you need to make a choice between the two as your first decision point, and then you work from there after you make that first decision.
So I'd love to choose to answer the question I was going to ask. With the geographic scope modification, if we go through with that annexation and just say we annex more area that's connected to the existing downtown, the identified geographic area, and it's connected to it. So let's say going past the church to Hairston, and there's commercial properties, could we then, through DDA law, it would be up to the DDA, and they could modify to expand the scope of what the DDA is serving as the designated downtown.
That remains your decision. So
Okay.
you define where they have jurisdiction to act.
But they could do that after it's already been set up through the change in the geographic scope.
Because you've always got that power to redefine the boundaries as always.
Okay, but that's a DDA board decision.
No,
That's ours.
Mayor council.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
A quick detail question about the composition. You said that the directors are appointed, and looking forward, it says that DDA is appointed by the governing body. Is that then up to us to decide? Do we each nominate a person? Does the city manager give a list of 7 people? Or is that entirely up to us how we decide?
That process, council member, it's completely yours. I mean, a lot of cities, that's a group decision, and I know I've had some clients that they take a different approach, each member appoints somebody, or they nominate somebody, and then the rest of the group sort of defers to their nomination. So that's how, whatever tradition y'all use here in Pine Lake.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we can let you continue. Sorry, I broke the seal there.
So let's talk about development authorities a little bit. And so, again, a different chapter of Title 36 of the Georgia Code, and again, refers back to those constitutionally created goals to develop and promote trade, commerce, industry, and employment opportunities for the public good. So, I'm guessing from what I'm hearing or not hearing that you have not had a city development authority for Pine Lake. Okay. So this is a separate entity, very similar in nature. So there is a development authority that can exist in every city and every county in the state. What the procedure is that you adopt a resolution that activates the development authority of Pine Lake. And so then it exists. It's, again, a public body affiliated with the city, but actually legally independent from you, like as is a DDA. And I'll touch a little bit on this, and just let me give an example that's fairly close to you. So everyone's heard all the discussion about the Rivian plant that East of you. And so that's an effort of a joint 4-county development authority where those 4 counties went together quite a while ago, actually, over 10 years ago, with the idea that what's good here is going to be good here. That we'll spread the wealth of the employment and all those kind of things. And what's down there in Stanton Springs is not just Rivian. I mean, there are already a big Facebook facility. There are other entities down there. So anyway, just want to touch a little bit on the ability to create joint development authorities with somebody else, because the state loves regionalism. So to the extent you can do something with one of your neighbors, they tend to like that and look favorably upon issuing grants and those kind of things. So again, this entity has citywide jurisdiction, so they're not bound by any of the things we've discussed for the last few moments. And they have all these powers that are listed there, and I would mention like the third bullet, which is issue revenue bonds to finance qualified projects. That's really probably why a lot of these entities exist, because as you know, the city can't enter into long-term debt that buys successors in office, but development authorities and DDAs can do that. So that's really a major purpose why they exist, or one of the certainly the benefits of why development authorities exist. And we won't get, I won't get too much into the limitations, because that's again a discussion for another day. So let's talk about terms of office for these. Again, seven or nine, between 7 and 9 members, and again, staggered term, I talked about earlier. So you'll see the qualifications are much less onerous with regard to development authority. Taxpayers reside within the city for which the authority is created. So you wouldn't necessarily bring in the owners of local businesses that don't reside, that we could within Timely. You cannot, it's called the power of self-appointment, does not exist with regard to development authorities. So again, as Chris pointed out earlier, with the DDA, one of you has a seat at the table. With the development authority, you're not a vote, which is a matter to be considered. So we provided you with a little chart that I hope will kind of lay out some of these kind of things. And you'll see that, as we talked about a little bit, the Urban Redevelopment Agency, which is something that you can designate the DDA to also serve as, and you'll see a little asterisk that talks about, if I heard correctly, the city is a quarter-mile.
Square.
So 5-mile jurisdiction, that would really open a lot of
We can take on Walmart.
That'd be quite the downtown.
Yes, it would.
It definitely would. So anyway, hope this kind of gives you again a
Mhm.
view of the distinctions between the two, and helps you make the decision on what's best for the future of Pine Lake. Sounds like an exciting venture, and especially the annexation opportunities. If you don't have worked in cities that have in counties, cities that are located within counties where the county, for whatever reason, didn't want the cities to grow. And so the fact that you may not have to fight that battle with the county is really a great benefit, and going to make that road a lot easier for all. We hope that really works out well.
Great. Thank you for this.
Thank you,
Pleasure
Jim.
to meet y'all, and nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Merry
it.
Christmas.
You too.
Happy Thanksgiving. All right. This is a lot to digest this evening, y'all. It's a big agenda. It's great. It's the season of visioning, on all accounts. So, all right, let's move on to public comment. 3 minutes each. If you have a comment, anybody? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to reports and other business. My report, comments, I guess. Thank you to the staff and city manager and city attorney for putting together these presentations of really vital information today. As we were just talking about, it's a lot to think about, and we have a lot of big decisions coming up. I'm really appreciative to the incoming council folk here for being informed and ready to hit the ground with the context that we've been talking about for the past bunch of months, and longer. So thank you for all of that. In the interest of time, I'll keep my comments brief and turn it over to council if you have any comments.
I have one comment.
Great.
On Tuesday next week, is that the 9th?
Sounds
Next
right,
week?
yeah.
It's December, God. I signed up to go to the Georgia Academy for Economic Development, a course called The Essentials that's being hosted by GMA, but it's not through GMA. So it's a full-day workshop on all the essentials of economic development. So
Great.
I may be regretting that after about 2 hours. Don't
But you'll get
know,
lunch.
But I'll get coffee, breakfast. They don't say anything about lunch, but I'm assuming it's included.
Well, I was going to announce that Councilmember Woods and I will be attending the DCVB luncheon on Thursday. That's the DeKalb Convention and Visitors Bureau, which may be a little less strenuous than a day of economic development, but we're excited to go.
Better food.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, information for the e-blast, news blast, whatever we call it these days. Anything? The candle or the lake lighting, the cookie,
Lighting the lake, toy drive.
cookie lighting,
Toy drive.
toy drive.
Coffee at the beach house.
Any public work
House, coffee house.
dates that need to go out, paving or anything like that? No.
And thank you for sending out the, I don't know if everyone got the email from Georgia Power about a potential power disruption on Thursday. I asked Ned to send out an e-blast for that, which you did, thank you.
BK had sent out a schedule for continued work along the dam on the
Yeah,
11th.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
great.
11th to 14th, so we should include that.
Yep, that was included this past Friday, and I'll continue through that work.
Can I ask about street sweeping? Is that
A thing?
done?
He sent out a notice
mean-
about it recently.
Well, I mean, there was supposed to be street sweeping, and then, well, anyway, I was worried about the trash and stuff, but something happened on our street anyway that piled leaves up in big piles, but the piles are still there. Do we know? The one meeting that BK's not
Right.
here, but
We can
anyway,
find out.
I don't know. I guess, could we find out if there's continuing street sweeping activity and see where we are on that? Because I'm not clear.
It looks like the leaf vacuum and pig pen are hooked up and ready to go,
Maybe it's because of rain or something?
but they
Could
haven't
be.
gone. So
Mhm. So maybe an update about that.
Okay.
Great, thanks, y'all. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
I move that we move into an executive session.
Did I do that right, Chris? Yes, ma'am. Okay, gets me every time.
I'll
Okay,
second that.
second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, we're gonna go into executive session in the back. We don't have any other business when we come back, so if you leave, you're not missing anything. And thank you for being here.
Except for the smiling faces.
Except for meeting adjournment. And don't forget to